Hello and welcome to InFocus with me, Curtis Hinton, on Quews News. Today on the programme, we'll be discussing Labour's controversial devolution plans and whether they're truly in the best interests of communities or if it's just another costly gamble with taxpayers' money. We'll also examine the rising water bills hitting households across the country and the more questionable appointment of Lord Mandelson as the UK ambassador to the US. Plus, we'll be looking at the troubling case of a British teen caught in Dubai's legal system for a consensual relationship. I'm pleased to be joined by two experts today, a political commentator Lee Harris and human rights lawyer David Hay. So thank you both for joining me today. There's a lot to go through. The devolution of the town councils. David, I'm going to come to you first. You are a councillor yourself. What's your thoughts on this? What's your opinion?
I think, it was interesting. I had a council meeting last week and we were discussing it. Obviously down in Cornwall, Cornwall became a unitary authority quite some time ago. So the district councils were removed and we have one unitary authority. But it's a relatively small one. We've got about 500,000 people in Cornwall. So there's talk about Cornwall being merged with Devon. And you can imagine how popular that is amongst the Cornish. It really isn't very popular at all. Speaking, obviously from personal experience, I can see that if, the authority was merged with Devon, you would actually damage, I think, democracy and local representation. So I think there's a lot of bad things in disguise by this Labour plan, from my experience, certainly in Cornwall, because Cornwall and Devon merging as an authority isn't going to be in the interests, I think, of people here, certainly in Cornwall. That's from the local experience. And when you look at kind of a wider, you look at the country in a wider perspective, the idea that elections may be cancelled. I mean, that's something else we were discussing at the recent council meeting. I mean, it's horrifying people. I mean, it's almost discussions that you never thought you would have about, a government coming in and stopping elections because they want to jiggle around with so-called democracy. It's a worry, I think. It's certainly speaking from down here.
Do you think, from a legal perspective, that the constituents of the area have a right to say, no, we don't want this? Do you think that should be a voice that they can have?
I think, I think ideally, yes. But I think, particularly, I remember with Cornwall, we basically decided we didn't want a mayor. We turned that down. And it's almost like punishment now. Well, you go merge with Devon then if you didn't want a mayor. So I think it'd be an ideal situation, yes. And I certainly think, certainly even from the Cornwall Council here, the leader is very much on record as saying this is not in the interest of the people of Cornwall in having a bigger authority. We've already got a unitary authority. We've done that. We're doing very well, I think, Cornwall Council compared to other councils in the country. So it would be good that the local people have a say on that, and I think I know what the say would be, but I can't see that happening. It doesn't appear that involving people in those decisions is something that Angela Rayner will be doing going forward.
Lee, the whole idea is to make there less councils, to put the smaller councils together. This was done, locally to where I live, not that long ago. It was southwest Bedfordshire, and then it's central Bedfordshire, and things are moving around constantly. But this seems to be something completely different that's not been done in recent times anyway. There's going to be more mayors. We look at London, the idea of a mayor sometimes, how long do they get? Should there be limit times on mayors, like there is a president, if you like? Obviously, I know they're completely different roles, but could this just really confuse local democracy? And is it going to further away the average person from Parliament?
Yes, I'm not a big fan of this idea. Anything that Labour come out with anyway terrifies me, especially when they're centralising massive portions of local government like this. It's going to cost a fortune. It sounds like if Labour are going to be doing it, it would be a disaster from start to finish anyway. I'm also from the West Country, so I completely hear what was being said earlier. And we have a mayor in Bristol, although he's I think we've changed hands now. But our most recent mayor was Marvin Rees. And he was an absolute nightmare. The whole thing was diabolical. So no, I'm not a big fan personally of mayoralships. Although I do understand there has to be an element of local democracy. But like already has been said, with regards to how Labour run and organise councils, they don't exactly have a very good track record, especially when you look at certain councils like Birmingham, I think, which is the biggest council in Europe, is currently bankrupt and they have no money. So it seems like it doesn't really matter about the size of the operation if it's being organised and coordinated by a Labour Party, especially if they're in government. It's just going to be a disaster.
You referenced debt there, Lee. So the restructuring would transfer £43 billion worth of existing debt to taxpayers. So is there going to be higher tax burdens? And obviously through the newly formed council, so it'd be spread across a wider area. That includes £24 billion held by 21 county councils and 160 district councils and £19 billion from smaller councils. Are we looking at more tax hikes coming up?
Of course we are. I mean, obviously it remains to be seen, but I think everyone's guts will probably be feeling the same as mine, in as much as that I don't think you can go through a process like this without there being increased financial burden for people living locally to the area. And I think, obviously, it goes without saying that there's already a huge amount of pressure on local councils and people who are basically skint at the moment because of increased taxes. We have the highest tax burden since the Second World War. But yeah, I think it's the whole concept of Labour doing something like this, I just find utterly terrifying. It's going to be a disaster. It's going to cost everyone a lot more money. It's going to be more bureaucracy and less democracy. That's how I see it.
David, you touched on it earlier. I didn't ignore it. The elections being cancelled. Reform have come out. Obviously, huge rise for Reform at the moment. I think I read this morning there's 1,000 new under 25-year-olds that have joined the party in the last 24 hours. They accuse Labour of attempting to cancel elections in their key target areas, undermining the democratic process. Do you think that's what this is, or do you think Labour have had this in their plans for a while, and actually it was just unfortunate timing for Reform?
I mean, it's certainly very helpful to them, whether there's a sinister plan behind it or not. It's certainly one that will benefit them, And again, like I said, I mean, when we were sitting at the council meeting last week talking about this, the idea that a democratically elected government wants to cancel, the May elections, and while we think Cornwall's going ahead, who knows? And it's bizarre, unthinkable, almost unfathomable to think that we're sitting here talking about a government cancelling elections. Yeah. It's shocking.
Do you think the elections maybe should go ahead and then this change should come after May?
Well, absolutely. I think that if they can make a case for certain locations, certain councils where there's going to be an absolute change. But even that, I think it's very hard because they're talking about making these changes. I think in 27 is it 2027? I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but so it's still quite a way away. So I think extending effectively the existing councils and cancelling elections for that period of time, I don't think it's acceptable. I think you need to have elections.
I think some of the elections they're talking 12 months, some they're talking 24. So we could, but like you say, it's not that long away for these current elections for them to maybe just hide it for now.
But there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee that these actual changes will happen in those periods of time. They say they will now, but how do we know that come in 12 months or 24 months that those the mergers of the council, the various changes have actually gone through? We don't know that.
So in Labour's defence, they have said this is all part of their commitment for building 1.5 million homes in the next parliamentary term, and emphasising that it gives more local regions power outside of London. Do you foresee that actually being the case? Obviously, you are part of a parish council, so when it comes to the county councils, the roles are slightly different. Your power, let's say, is slightly different. Do you see this being the case? Do you think it is actually giving power back to the regions, or do you think it's going to be almost like a Soviet Union-esque, where they're giving they're putting a middle level government in place so they can control the people locally, and then the government control them?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it is. I think it's taking power away from the people. Again, taking Cornwall as an example. If you merge Cornwall with Devon and you have someone, the other side of Devon deciding on a small matter down at the end of Cornwall near Land's End, I mean, that isn't bringing power and democracy closer to the people. It's pushing it further away, and it's making, I think, the service that you're able to give as a council worse, because the local knowledge is key. And also, you mentioned parish council, but what then next for parish councils and town councils? Are they suddenly going to have more roles, bearing in mind that they're voluntary? Or what? There's nothing really been said about what's going to happen with parish councils, and so I think it's rushed through, ill thought through, and I think it, like you said, probably it is about ultimately getting more power for Labour. It's certainly not giving power when you move it further away.
Lee, do you think this could help Labour in terms of elections? Do you think that this is something that when it comes to 2029, that they could go, well, actually, we did that and it was the right decision, and we're going to win more votes this way? I mean, they had less votes this time round than under their worst performance supposedly ever under Jeremy Corbyn. They had less votes this time. Are they going to pick up votes with this sort of move?
I'm not sure they'll move, but I think it will benefit Labour, and I think they know this full well, because it will prevent Reform, running against them in these elections that they may cancel. The optics of this is utterly awful. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, was it, that Labour said that Reform were a threat to democracy, and yet here they are actually cancelling elections. And like you said, I mean, I hadn't even considered that. It's a very good point. Why now? Why do they need to do this right now? Why can't they just boot this into the long grass a little bit? And it reminds me a little bit, not that this is old history, but when you think about what happened with Elon Musk, and this is on topic, it's absolutely fine for UK businesses to donate millions of pounds to political parties. As soon as Reform turn around, as soon as Labour hear that Elon Musk is backing Reform, all of a sudden it's a problem. And all of this combined, the optics just look like Labour are desperately clinging to power after seeing the appalling polling that has and the disaster of the government that we had so far. So I think they know that the writing currently is on the wall. I know that they've got a lot of time in office, do not get me wrong, but there are already talks and manoeuvres happening to get rid of Keir Starmer. The wheels are well and truly already falling off just after 5 months.
I think from the start, no one's really convinced that Labour, I mean, even by the voting, yes, they had the majority, but like we said, the voting share was just almost so small for such a large majority, if you like, the numbers that voted through. We are looking at another general election in just over 4.5 years' time. There's a lot for them to get through. Do you think Starmer will still be there, David? Do you think that this could be potentially something that he dies on the hill on?
I don't think so. I think, in my personal wishful thinking that he's not still there in 5 years, but I think, whether you see all these polls calling for new general elections, he's got a majority, and unless there's some form of skullduggery in his party, quite possible, I can't see him going anywhere soon, sadly.
You think he's going to remain there? I mean, we remember Harriet Harman come out during the week and did say that Reform were a threat to democracy. From a legal perspective, obviously, I know you're human rights, but from the humanities side of things, for the UK people, do you see them as a threat to society?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We're in a democracy. You can vote for a party. Reform is one of the parties that you can vote for, albeit you might not be able to vote for them because Labour is apparently trying to stop people voting in the next elections. So I don't think that the Reform is a threat to democracy. At the moment, it's Labour that's a threat to democracy.
Lee, do you think this is old school communism? Is this Starmer coming out with his, like I said, like two-tier maybe government where they've got the top government are just tearing over the remainder of the middlemen, if you like, and they're watching over all of us civilians?
It certainly does feel that way. And I do not think Keir Starmer will be there to see them into the next election. One thing you've got to bear in mind is that Keir Starmer is generally very disliked within the Labour Party. We've seen signs of the cracks between people already showing in the Labour Party. We've had Diane Abbott recently, who I appreciate has never been a huge fan of Keir Starmer, explaining that he was, parachuted into his seat. He's not been a politician very long. She said that he hasn't really got a feel for politics. And it really does say something if Diane Abbott is capable of calling you out.
Yeah. If she's capable of putting two and two together, really, that's what it is.
Yeah, exactly. So, the last thing you'd want is Diane Abbott actually owning you publicly. But no, Keir Starmer, to me, he looks rattled. He is under a lot of, I think, stress, but not from the job. He's under the stress of the bad decisions and the bad performance that we've seen so far, not just from the economy, but some of these ridiculous economic decisions that we've seen from the recent budget. To me, I think he has got time on his side, but the one thing he hasn't got on his side is people supporting him with his own party is dwindling. I've also heard rumours that Wes Streeting has been doing the rounds in the parliamentary bars, buying everyone drinks and buttering everyone up, making manoeuvres. I do not think for 1 minute that, bookmark this post, as it were, Keir Starmer will not lead Labour into the next election.
Now, the little bit of Starmer bashing may be warranted. Has he had a hard entrance? Was he given such a difficult job, almost kind of a Theresa May back in 2016 when she took over from Cameron with the whole Brexit deal? Has Starmer walked into a job which is just not possible to do? Because like you say, maybe doesn't have the support. He was just thrown in there. Or do you think he's actually made it worse for himself? David?
I mean, it's, he knew what he was getting into. That's the first thing. And, of course, there were difficult things, particularly when you look at the situation we have with immigration and the people coming across the channel. There's, there are things like that were very in the media all the time, that are lots of constant pressure. But he knew what he was getting into. But what he appears to be doing when you look at the farmers, when you look at the pensioners, and now you look at what we're talking about now with the democracy, he's making it much worse for himself. He's doing these things. These are not things he took over. So, I don't think he can claim that now. Obviously there were problems that he needed to deal with, but I think he's making things worse for himself and the country.
I think this whole Westminster bubble is really coming to the forefront, right? That it's almost that they do live in that, and some of the decisions he's making, it's very much he doesn't see what's happening on the outside world, what's happening for his people that he's meant to be serving. He's not leading them, he's serving them, which is something I'm always keen to emphasise on. I want to move on from Sir Keir Starmer. Maybe Ofwat this week announced that water bills are going to rise on an average of 36%. Under the Conservatives, they didn't see many rises, and the Labour government have said that this is the reason why there has to be such a big hike. Is it something you're for or against, Lee?
Oh, well, the actual rate rises themselves?
The rate rises. Do you think it's fair in a cost of living crisis for them to rate it so high?
No, of course not. I'm a pragmatist in as much as that, if there's a desperate need to increase rates for something, then I understand that. But water is a bit of a conundrum for me. You might almost hear a slightly left-wing viewpoint from me on this. I am very torn about how we deal with our water companies. I don't think there is a single person in this country that will look at what's happened with investors taking out, 85 billion or something like that over the past decade out of water companies, and yet not investing a single penny. Now that is capitalism just simply not working. And arguably, it's very difficult to have a capitalist system within a monopolistic system like our water companies. It doesn't really make a huge amount of sense. It's not like you can, choose your water company or pick the best deal or things like that. It just doesn't work that way. So I am pretty torn about how it works. But I think what is going to, grind the gears of the public is the amount of money that has been taken out of these water companies, the almost non-existent investment into the infrastructure, and yet we, the bill payers, are going to have to pick up the tab for this utter disastrous situation. So I do have sympathy, believe it or not, with people on the left who say that we should bring these into public ownership. The problem that I have with bringing them into public ownership, it will cost us an absolute fortune. It will cost billions and billions of pounds to take these. And honestly, I don't trust the public sector to run our water companies efficiently either. So I am genuinely torn about it. But if I had to make a choice right now, I wouldn't nationalise them. I'd keep them privatised, but I would somehow change that system and maybe think of ways of penalising the people who run these companies in a way that they are unable to get away with what it is they're doing. I don't know, cancel bonuses or make it illegal for them to take money out of the company without X amount of investment in, because at the end of the day, this is a critical part of our infrastructure. And at the moment, the whole system is completely broken.
Well, that's why they're saying it's 104 billion investment into infrastructure, upgrades to water infrastructure, services, tackling environment issues with sewages. David, have they got a clear argument as to why? I mean, the Labour government blame the Conservatives, as they have done for everything almost, as to why they're having to allow this rise to go through. If it's for infrastructure, Is it going to be a short-term rise? Do you think they need to come out and say, well, look, it's a short-term rise because we need to get this capital in to do the improvements, and then we can bring it back down again, and everyone will be happy?
I mean, what's clear is that it's the system isn't working, particularly when you look at sewage and particularly when you look at investment in future projects. It's not there. I mean, again, living in Cornwall, I mean, if we want to go to the sea, we want to go surfing, we have to check an app to see if there's been sewage discharges in the beaches. And, even today, it's not safe to go swimming or surfing in the local beach. And on top of that, every summer we get a hosepipe ban. I mean, those are little things, but the point is that it isn't working, particularly on the sewage side. And my worry with this is that if these prices go up, and that that does happen, what's the guarantee that these changes will absolutely be made, or that it's not wasted or spent or something else? And that's the worry that I have. That you can't. I don't think certainly can't trust the water companies, and probably not also the government when it comes to this, because they've shown time and time again that they haven't invested in water in this country. They haven't invested in tackling the severe sewage problem we have in our seas and rivers, which is embarrassing. I mean, and I think, so that's, I wouldn't mind paying more for a water bill if there was a guarantee that we will have a sustainable water supply in future that, is brought into the modern world, and that we don't pollute our own seas and rivers. But I just don't trust whether it's the regulator, the water companies, or the government when it comes to that, because they've proven time and time again they can't be trusted.
I mean, Thames Water have said that they are financially struggling too. They wanted a 59% increase themselves, and they wanted a £3 billion loan to stay operational. I mean, as constituents, we don't have a choice of who our water supplier is. It's forced upon us. Do you think there's an opportunity for it to become maybe part state, part private? So then as owners, because obviously being the government running it, there is some sort of responsibility. You need to answer to people, because a private company at this moment in time doesn't necessarily need to answer. Do you think there's an opportunity for that, Lee, in terms of a split between the two, privatisation as well as state-owned?
To be honest, I think that's possibly the only way forward. I agree with what's just been said. My own feelings are exactly the same. I do not trust it to be run efficiently and well within the public sector. And as we can see, it's not been run well at all in the private sector. So maybe a new approach is needed. If a hybrid approach is the right one, brilliant. But we do need to do something different. It's definitely not working. It is an absolute disgrace. But going back to your original point, one thing that, I too would be happy to pay more if there was a guarantee that the water supply would be better, and we weren't, dumping so much sewage into the waters. That's appalling. But the tax burden, people just simply can't afford it at the moment. We're expected to have, you've seen the budget, what's going to come in next year. It's not just going to be hitting businesses with the rise to national insurance of businesses. It's going to be hitting people's jobs. People are losing their jobs through to net zero. Companies aren't hiring as much. People haven't got as much money in their pockets. So I do sympathise with the fact that this Labour government is getting in and everything seems to be going up. They promised not to raise electricity bills. Electricity bills are going up. They're telling us that water bills are going up. I just don't think people can physically cope with it anymore. So yes, I do think that there needs to be some sort of government intervention. I just do not think that it should be completely publicly owned. It's going to cost too much money.
Labour say they promised the pledges to ring-fence the investment for the infrastructure improvement, particularly to clean up rivers, lakes and seas, which again, if happens, the additional £31 and some pence a year for the next 5 years, I think the average person wouldn't mind paying for. Like you say, it's for a sustainable future with cleaner water. If that was genuinely to become the goal at the end, £157 on top of your bill from today to 5 years' time. Yes, I believe you both wouldn't mind paying if it was going to the infrastructure.
There is a threshold about the amount that you can extract from people. But yes, I agree with the principle that pay, if we're going to get a better service, maybe we should pay a bit more. But as I said, that people are really struggling right now. The last thing they need is yet another bill going up.
Well, Mike Keel from the CCW warned that many households will struggle to afford the increase, and he estimates 2 in 5 will not be able to afford it, full stop. We are in a cost of living crisis still. I don't think we're out of that. I know they've held the interest rates, the Bank of England. probably slightly more lenient on this Labour government, I think, since they've come into power than they were on the previous Conservative government. People are really going to feel this. Can you then foresee maybe, I don't know, a water relief for some people, a further increase of a water relief? I mean, if we're going to go to local councils now, which are going to become bigger, is it going to become their problem to deal with? Is it going to become national government? It's a lot of ifs and buts, and I think the initial, the paper put out for this, the initial bill put out, isn't actually black and white. It doesn't tell people what's going to happen.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, look, we shouldn't be a country that can't afford to pay for water. We shouldn't have anyone in our country that can't afford to pay for water. And I think the fact that that's even a possibility shows how bad things are and how much work needs to be done. And, you said about, Labour's promises and pledges when it comes to improving the water if they get a little bit more money here and there. They just don't fill me with any kind of confidence or hope. But it's a horrific situation to be having to have a discussion like this about whether or not people can afford water.
We're now going to move on to the appointment of the UK ambassador to the US, Lord Peter Mandelson. Now, smirks from both of you immediately on this topic. Lee, we'll start with you. What's your thoughts?
I've switched a little bit on this. Initially, I thought, well, considering the actual talent available in the Labour Party, maybe he's not such a bad choice. However, seeing the revelations, well, not really revelations, thinking about the suitability for him as a US ambassador does fill me full of dread slightly. I mean, this is a man who said, again, I think it's quite difficult to find someone who hasn't said disparaging things about Donald Trump in the Labour Party, but he has said some very disparaging things about.
Lee, I'll tell you what he said. So he's called Donald Trump a danger to the world, a reckless figure, and a bully. However, he's recently softened his stance on him, emphasising the importance to establish productive relationships with the Trump administration.
Funny that, yeah. But I think he also called him a racist. I might have read that somewhere. So yeah, I mean, for that reason alone, I honestly believe that if you've done that, you should be just excluded full stop from being on that alone. But it does get worse. This is a man who's been said to have, and I can say this happily, it's been printed in the press without me having to say allegedly, he has had a very, very close relationship with a convicted paedophile, Jeffrey Epstein. They had gone to birthday parties with each other. I think he even had a pet name for him. He called him Petey. And Donald Trump, prior to the election, has said that he would consider, he's very, very much open to releasing the client list. Now, it just makes me wonder whether that's an accident waiting to happen. It just seems politically naive to pick someone with such a charged background. And I haven't even gone into the fact that he had to resign twice in disgrace because of the way that he was conducting himself when he was in office. Yeah. So I have changed looking at who else they could possibly. I mean, my choice, especially if I was Keir Starmer, would be Nigel Farage. However, I can slightly appreciate how bad that would look on the Labour Party. But there is a good reason to pick Nigel Farage. He has the ear of Donald Trump. He's a very close friend of Donald. Not just Donald Trump, pretty much most of the Republican governing party he's friends with. So it would be a very clever choice to have picked Nigel Farage, although obviously no one thought that was ever going to happen.
Well, do you think that he's really missed the opportunity here to say to Farage, here you go, here's your opportunity, and then to say, well, look, he claimed he is your man. Nigel Farage is part of the party which is the fastest growing at the moment in the UK. It's the opportunity for Starmer to potentially have a good relation with the US. I mean, let's face it, Elon Musk, a huge part of the new Trump administration, doesn't like the Labour Party full stop. There's no denying that. But here's an opportunity for Starmer to turn around and go, well, look, you've got such a good relationship with them. Let's fix it. Let's do the best we can for the people. And if he doesn't do that, Labour's got, Keir Starmer's got ammo against the fastest growing party in the United Kingdom at the moment. David, do you think there is an issue here with the connection with Epstein, with the criminal connection he could have? Obviously, he's not a convicted criminal in any way or form. There's no links to him being a part of the criminal activities. But have Labour shot themselves in the foot here with a really silly appointment?
I think they have. I mean, I said earlier on about Starmer making problems for himself that didn't exist. He's just, everything he does, he's causing more problems. I mean, whether there's connections to Epstein or not, and whether they're really bad ones, we'll come to find out, I'm sure. But whether or not is Lord Mandelson the best person that we have in this country to be our ambassador to America? Clearly, the answer is no. And then it comes to, well, why haven't we found a better person? We mentioned, Nigel Farage. He would be a better person. But I think, something like that would take statesman-like actions. And what we've seen from the Labour Party is kind of juvenile and quite cringeworthy comments, whether it's from David Lammy about foreign leaders and Donald Trump and Mandelson. These are supposed statesmen and politicians. They shouldn't be it shouldn't be school name calling. And I think it's just embarrassing. And, if we really want to have a good relationship with America, putting these two forward, people that have insulted Donald Trump left, right and centre, it isn't a good start.
It's not, and their role, the position he's got is is tasked with managing the delicate US-UK relationship between between the Trump administration, global tariffs, stuff like that, NATO issues. But we talk about name calling. Last night in the US, our early hours, a top campaign advisor, I don't know if you've both seen this, Chris Lascivita, has called him a moron, has called Lord Peter Mandelson a moron, and has questioned the appointment. I mean, it doesn't get off to a great start, does it? When Trump comes in on the 20th, Lee, what do you think the relationship between how good do you think the relationship between the UK and the US is going to be?
I think that these stupid things that people have said are genuinely not as important as our relationship with America. So, putting my grown-up hat on, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of people will be putting their grown-up hats on when it comes down to real nuts and bolts business. We are going to have a good relationship with the United States. I think that is the case.
We've already heard both parties, doesn't it? It benefits everyone.
Exactly. And we've already heard as well from the Trump campaign that he's willing to work with anyone. He's, Keir Starmer and David Lammy have sat down and had a meal with him. Apparently he offered David Lammy seconds, which is not surprising. But there is a relationship there. Do I think that the Mandelson sort of slant is going to make things worse? I don't think it can get much worse. Just thinking about who else that he's put as our foreign secretary, for example, has said a lot worse things about Donald Trump. Like I said, there is very little talent in the Labour Party, and you struggle to find someone who hasn't just said all these ridiculous, childish name calling about Donald Trump. So they've almost tied their own hands. They're an opposition party in government. They haven't got a clue how to govern. They haven't got a clue how to be diplomatic or to do politics like a grown-up. That doesn't appear to be part of the Labour Party's toolkit. They just don't have the facilities, as someone said, to do this properly. So what else can they do? There are a couple of people maybe actually that I would have chosen, the Labour MPs that have kept their nose clean and remained relatively grown up. But there is no way that Labour can improve this situation, even if they tried. So they're just running with it. And I sort of get that.
I mean, Mandelson's political background, he served, as David said, at the previous in a previous Labour government. He served in key roles, including the Trade Secretary and Business Secretary under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. He was also the European Union's Trade Commissioner and played a crucial role in Labour's switch to the centre under Tony Blair for the 1997 election. This appointment, he doesn't take over from Karen Pierce until early 2025. Could you see a U-turn, David? Do you think we could see a spin on this because of the negative press?
I don't think so. I think that would damage them perhaps even a little bit more. I mean, I don't think we're going to see many U-turns at this stage from Keir Starmer, because I think once he does one, he's going to have more problems. And so I don't see any changes. But what you listing off what Peter Mandelson has done just strikes me as jobs for the boys. It may well be that he's very qualified and he's the best person, but he seems to get in an awful lot of well salaried positions from obviously his roles before. And it should be who is the best person in this country for that job, who can put our interests better, and who will work with the US better. And I don't think anyone, if you kind of have those as the things you need to tick, I can't imagine anyone thinking Peter, obviously apart from Keir Starmer apparently, is the right person. And all of this, it's a really important time for us and America in the relationship. And these are discussions that we shouldn't be worrying about. We shouldn't be worrying, about. It's almost like we're going to marry our future bride, as it were, and we've already started insulting them. It's terrible, I think, and it's shocking that we're even having this discussion. You almost can't believe it.
Lee, do you agree with David? Do you think that there's no opportunity for, or he shouldn't, maybe not? Well, he probably shouldn't U-turn because of the backlash he's going to get from that.
Yeah, I agree with that principle that if he did sort of swap out Mandelson in a few months, it would look ridiculous. I, for one, would enjoy very much attacking that. But I go back to what I was saying, and partially what David was saying too, is the lack of talent available, the finding someone who hasn't said stupid things about Donald Trump or the Trump campaign is going to be very, very difficult for the Labour Party.
So on there, Lee, sorry to cut in there. Do you think that a lot of politicians around the world are having that issue within their parties, though? Because you think back to before 2016 when Trump was elected, or 2015, a lot of people didn't think it was going to happen. So a lot of people judged his character. And then when he lost again, the first time, obviously, again, people started attacking him. And it just felt like there was no real acknowledgement that he is now a politician, because he is a politician. He was the president. He's the incumbent president. Do you think that a lot of politicians and parties around the world are having that issue with the US at the moment in terms of putting people who haven't said something negative about Trump in positions where you have to talk to Trump and his team?
Yeah, I think there's an element of that. I think the problem with, I'm not just to say this is limited completely to the left, but the left do have a problem with name calling and putting themselves in a position without thinking through what's going to happen in the future. And looking at the Labour Party, I mean, it's not just this, it's every single aspect of the way that they've governed so far. They are an opposition party. They're not a party fit for government, in my view. And all of this is now coming back to bite them in the backside. And it is embarrassing. It's embarrassing for the UK. And I agree, there are going to be lots of other countries out there that are probably in a very similar position. But I think that it just strikes me that is it's a way of kind of showing that we seem to have lost a little bit of grown-up diplomacy with all politicians, and maybe that's the rise of social media, sound bites, getting there. I don't know, but to me, it just seems that as time has gone on, the years have gone on, we do seem to have lost politicians that use. Think back to people who I disagree with in the past, like Paddy Ashdown and people like that. That we used to have some really good politicians back in the day. We don't really have that level of capability anymore. We've seen a real sort of drain of talent from politicians, especially in the Labour Party, and I just think that it's a testament to how we seem to have lost that kind of knack of diplomacy over the years.
And they've had 14 years to develop talent as well. I know elections, they come and go, and of course, like with the Conservative Party, they lost some key figures like Penny Mordaunt and that sort of stuff in this election. They could come back in 4.5 years' time. I want to move on to the final topic of today's show, and something I know, David, that you are very close to, and that's the Marcus Fakana ongoing relations with Dubai. So just talk us through what happened. So he went to Dubai on a holiday. He had consensual relations with a female over there who was 17, so over the legal age here in the UK. And the mother found some contraception or something?
Yeah, so basically, I mean, Marcus and his family went on what they thought would be a dream holiday to Dubai, which many people do in England, and the girl and her mother also perhaps did the same. They stayed at the Hilton, and Marcus at the time was 18. The girl was 2 weeks shy of her 18th birthday. They had a consensual relationship, a holiday fling, if you like, in the hotel. And multiple times they met, and then the young girl went home with her mother before Marcus's family, and they were planning on meeting up when Marcus got back to London. The mother, however, found messages and between Marcus and her daughter. She's quite strict, got very, very upset, and took what is, I think, a very cruel step of, rather than just having a discussion with her daughter and putting her views across, decided to report Marcus in Dubai to the police. Marcus was subsequently arrested, detained for a short period of time, and then put through a court process, and I think it was the 9th of this month that he was found guilty of having a relationship with a girl under 18, so a 17-year-old girl, and sentenced to a year.
Just to stop there, so he confessed to that though. Did he confess on 3 occasions to have consensual relations with the girl?
Yeah, he signed a confession at the beginning. I mean, that at the start. What often happens when you get arrested there is it's a very stressful situation. You imagine if you're an 18-year-old as well. I mean, you're put into an Arabic police station. They have guns. They're screaming at you in Arabic. So there was a lot of pressure on him. But he was found guilty on the 9th of that and given a 1-year sentence. Now, the worry at the moment is that the maximum sentence is 20 years for that. And at the moment, it could be that the prosecution is going to appeal the 1-year sentence and seek a higher one. Now, on top of that, we were talking about, obviously, the Labour's inadequacies earlier. David Lammy is his MP. And David Lammy has effectively washed his hands of the thing and said he can't assist because there's a conflict of interest because he's the Foreign Secretary. And interestingly, on the day before the actual hearing that took place was when Keir Starmer was there in Dubai, obviously trying to get investment for the country from the dictators there, and then moved to Saudi. So it shows you there's no kind of influence there at all. So at the moment, an 18-year-old kid is actually stuck in Dubai, facing up to 20 years, and the only hope he's got is a pardon from the Sheikh. And I understand he's broken the law and when in Rome, etc. But something that I think you see, and when you look at Dubai, and I'm sure when Mark has looked at it, he looks at all the influencers, whatever they are, the celebrities, the sports people, even our politicians promoting it as, I beat the Middle East, this safe place where you can go and drink on the beach at designer nightclubs and everything's fine and it's like the UK. It is not. And I see it time and time again, people falling foul, thinking it's fine to go there with your girlfriend or boyfriend and stay in the same room and have a drink on the beach. It is not. The laws there, everyone listening really needs to listen to this, are very similar to Saudi. They've just got a better PR company and it's covered in glitter. And Marcus' life, could be destroyed because of this. And so I think, politicians and a lot of influencers effectively almost have blood on their hands because so many people fall into this trap because they promote it as something it's not. So I'll get off my soapbox now.
Ali, I mean, your face during that, you're very concerned to start with about the scenario of what's unfolding. I mean, from your perspective, what's your thoughts on this? Do you think that the punishment of a year, let alone the possibility of 20 years, is too much of a harsher sentence?
Of course it is. I agree with very much 99% of what's just been said. It is a very difficult situation. I don't think it's fair, especially not with these ridiculous sentences where they can possibly push for up to 20 years for something like this. It's awful, especially when we sit here from, looking at it from a Western democracy.
Yeah.
It looks and sounds awful. I feel very bad for the kid. It was completely innocent. But I've got to put those emotions to one side because I can't sit here and say, hand on heart, that people, when they come to our country, should respect our values and respect our laws, and then have that happen in someone else's country and then be a hypocrite about it. So I can't believe I'm saying this, but I actually do agree slightly with what David Lammy said, where he said that while you're in another country, and to be fair, David's made this point as well. Yeah. So it's not something I disagree with you on. But I do think everything should be done. The reason I was pulling my face is because David Lammy said it would be a conflict of interest as his job as Foreign Secretary. I would argue this is his exact job as Foreign Secretary.
Yeah.
I do not understand why. So we need to do everything we can to put pressure on the Saudi government to make sure that they can try and be lenient on this kid. I mean, the things that I was looking at was the fact that they're both British, right? So they. I know this doesn't count. I'm not making excuses. They were in a country where this is illegal, but they're both British, and they both come from a country where the age of consent is 16, not 18. So I can totally see the innocence of what's happened.
Yeah.
And And I also believe that what this is just a personal opinion more than anything else, but what the mother did, I mean, that is next level bad. I mean, she must have known what would happen if she reported this. What you may be able to help me with, I'm assuming that the mother and the daughter had gone home and she had reported it to the police in Saudi. Is that how it happened?
I believe so. David, you can confirm that.
Yeah, that's essentially how it happened. I mean, it was almost, you could say, contrived. So, if she had reported it whilst she was still in Dubai, she as a witness wouldn't have been able to leave. So it's almost like it was somewhat planned, you could allege, because she got back to the UK and then reported it. Because if she was in Dubai, because she's a witness to a crime, she wouldn't have been able to leave until all of that had gone through. So she'd be stuck there as well. So it looks like she's put some thought into this process. And, it's not good. It's not good for Dubai, and I agree with exactly what you said. I mean, we wouldn't accept people here, whether it's the media or politicians, pressurising our judges to reduce sentences. I think it's not good for Dubai what's happened. It's not good for the girl and her family, because we're also not going to discuss who they are, but their names are out online everywhere, and it's obviously not good for Marcus. So no one's winning in this situation. It's a very difficult one. It really is, and it's heartbreaking.
Is this a circumstantial one where you'd like to think that the Sheikh could look at it and they could make the decision, well, look, he did wrong, he did not follow our laws. However, in this scenario, everything was consensual. She was 2 weeks away from being 18. It's not like we're talking that she was 14 or anything like that at all. She was overage in this country. He has served some time, and maybe come the new year, after a month or maybe two, he could be released and hopefully back home with his family. I mean, I couldn't even fathom what's going through his mind at the moment. And like you say, we're talking potentially he could get a pardon, but he could still be in there until he's 38.
Yeah, I mean, the options. Yeah.
I mean, I wish we could talk about it more. David, you'll have to come back on the programme, because I'd love to get into this more. Obviously, Marcus got our full support, and hopefully he's safe. He's being treated well over there, and I agree with what
he's learned a lesson.
This is it, yeah. But it needs to be publicised more, and maybe, like you said, David, there's an element of responsibility for the media out here, for the advertisements, for the celebrities to come out and say, these are the laws, this is what we're doing, this is the real, because they're being paid most of the time by the state or by a company over there, so they're allowed to potentially show stuff which might be breaking a law. But it's it's just the average Joe goes over there, or in this case, Marcus.
I think honestly that it would be in the best interest of Dubai as well to go easy on the kid.
Yeah. I think, completely agree. Because at the moment, this narrative is going to come out in the press, and it has been out in the press, and all it's going to do is make people think twice about going to Dubai, which they've spent millions investing into making a dream destination.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. We've got through an awful lot. I think it's clear that Labour aren't necessarily improving at the moment with what they're doing with the United Kingdom, but maybe there's hope still for Starmer to step down, and maybe someone else, maybe a Wes Streeting come in and show us what he's made of.
Maybe. I'm not holding my hopes up.
Well, thank you both, and enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Pleasure.
Take care. Well, that's all for today's episode of In Focus with me, Curtis Hinton. We've discussed some of the crucial issues facing the country, from Labour's devolution plans to the rising burden of taxpayers and the concerns surrounding our political leadership. A big thank you to our guests, Lee, the political commentator, and David Hay, human rights lawyer, for their valuable insights. Thank you to the audience for tuning in. We'll be back again next week with another episode of In Focus with me, Curtis Hinton, on Quews News.